It's weird when the games industry gives us a quote that sounds as ghoulish as EA's surprise mechanics. But you know what? I think this one hits the mark.
Minecraft is currently hosted by community servers. Call of Duty. It's an option that is out there in existence here today.
They're illegal.
Yeah, that sounds insane, and for many it's begging a question. Did the ESA's lies about illegal Minecraft servers just destroy a law that would have guaranteed that your games get preserved? That is what Stop Killing Games are claiming here. The Californian Protect Our Games bill has stalled out, and it stalled out after months of work. And if anything, the bill feels more warranted than it did when it was first proposed, of course because consoles are pretty much going to be leaving physical discs behind. This bill would have enshrined your right to access your games in the future. Now though, it's been stopped dead. Today's story kicked off with the Protect Our Games bill falling at its last real hurdle. All that was left was an appropriations committee and then a full Senate vote. So basically, the bill was sitting there ready to go pending any amendments, and we had seen some amendments. Last time we covered how the Assembly had already changed it to only cover games that would be new to the market, and that actually wasn't the end. After all the amendments had happened, the bill wouldn't actually start working until January 2028. Was also amended so that refunds would only be offered at a product's highest price in the 12 months before it shut down, and there was even a new option for developers, which was providing the tools and capability to run a private or community server independent of the publisher or developer's input or control. Would have been pretty awesome. So those are the main parts of the bill that were amended, and it all came from feedback from the Senate Committee on Privacy, Digital Technologies, and Consumer Protections. But as it now transpires, two of those things would seemingly kill the bill. Here's effectively what happened. The previous committee we've been talking about had consumer concerns and technology stuff at the top of its mind. But that committee was not the last stop. The next thing would be the Committee on Business, Professions and Economic Development, and their job is basically to handle the other side of things, what this would mean for the companies who would have to implement stuff to be compliant with this bill. Now, it really wasn't all that different from any of the other hearings that we've talked about in its tone or its structure. It was basically just another 25-minute conversation. Assemblyman Chris Ward had 2 minutes to explain the bill and why the bill was necessary. Basically, to explain how game ownership works now compared to way back in the 80s, and the lack of fairness with refunds. Of course, it wasn't just him. The Entertainment Software Association's representative, Gibbon, was there, and she was laying out their opposition to this bill. And that opposition is essentially how no licensed product in the market is subject to the standards that this bill proposes, and how in many cases companies are voluntarily providing refunds or warnings of service ending. And in addition to that, how a company could be required to offer a refund after a decade if they couldn't take any other option. So really, so far right, it was the same as any other hearing. It just seemed it would be a pedestrian thing that we would plod through and eventually it would progress. Now, what this needed to pass was a simple majority. That means 6 votes out of a possible 11. So that was effectively their objective, to get those votes. Now, the committee, of course, is able to ask questions. And this is where we get to the part that you've all been waiting for. How illegal Minecraft servers could possibly be a thing or even come into this, because it does sound downright bizarre. The answer to when Minecraft factors in is not straight away, because first up we had questions from Democrat Lola Smallwood Cuevas, and her question is for Mr. Ward. And it goes right at the first of those two bill killers. The refunds. Now, her issue is that it's not clear from the wording of the bill how refunds would actually be offered to customers, or whether the goal is to, quote, make the consumer whole. Basically, it seems, in her words, quote, very, very complicated, and she wondered how any implementation issues with copyright would be resolved. Ward, of course, had an answer to this, and it came in 2 parts. First, that right now, refunds aren't legally required at all.
If I signed up for today and it was gone in 2 weeks, then I kind of feel like I was really snookered and really sold a lemon there and probably deserve something back. So finding that time point, whether that's 6 months, a year, or longer, is the subject of, I think, that fine detail that we're working on.
Smallwood Cuevas agreed with the refund, but that the bill just wasn't clear on how it worked, never mind the, quote, other pieces. And she basically framed it as a concern that she'd already raised with Ward before the committee. So, because of this, she didn't think that she could support the bill as it stood. So that's obviously a roadblock for Stop Killing Games. And we should also notice what never got an answer in any of that stuff, and that was the copyright side. hold on to that, it'll be relevant later. Next then, we have Caroline Menjivar, also a Democrat. Now, her first question was for Gibbons and the ESA.
In the analysis, the author gave some examples. One of them was the Concorde. It was only on for 2 weeks and it got shut down. And we're talking about the ability for a consumer to be made whole if it gets off the server so quick. In that example, if I bought a game 2 weeks later, it's no longer on. Currently, right now, can I go and get a refund?
Now, Gibbons' answer on full refunds for Concorde after 2 weeks is honestly an all-timer. Here's the quote.
In the example of Concorde, Sony did offer full refunds to everybody who bought that game, and they were notified in advance. The reason that game got shut down is because players complained that they didn't like it. Sony said, okay, we heard you, they issued an apology, and they offered full refunds.
So basically, a game getting erased was reframed as good consumer-friendly customer service. As for the crew, well, it had been a decade, so no refunds. Just a warning, and that's what they think is fine. Menjivar landed where Ward and Smallwood Cuevas did as well, that a refund after 10 years may not be a, quote, reasonable time. But she did agree that something was actually needed, which I suppose would bode well. But now we get to the big moment. So because of that, I've got to be really precise about this. Menjivar asks Ward about the second thing that seems to have killed this bill, and that is the new private or community server clause. Both Ward and Gibbons respond, and it's best that you hear it.
One part of the bill is around the ability to go on a community server. The author is stating that that's currently allowed right now, so long as I don't want to misunderstand what you said, Assemblymember.
That's correct. Minecraft is currently hosted by community servers. Call of Duty. It's an option that is out there in existence here today.
They're illegal, and they are not in any way affiliated with Microsoft. Microsoft, for Minecraft, has gotten a lot of criticism because of those community servers not employing the same safety standards that Microsoft does on their Minecraft servers.
So is it like the black market of video games?
Yes, in fact, we consider it piracy. We have 2 pending lawsuits against private servers right now, and the United States Trade Representative, in their notorious markets reports on counterfeiting and piracy, has named some of these big private servers as a notorious market.
Now, at the risk of saying the obvious, Minecraft community servers are not illegal. That's an insane thing to say. There is no law against them. In fact, you can set them up using Minecraft's own provided server tools, and you can even not go to jail for doing so. So, on its face, this is absurd scaremongering from the ESA. It is absolutely mad. But in reality, and we do like to stay in reality, this was an example of how language in gaming is not quite the same as language in legislating. So, I have a question for you then. In current legal terms, what is the difference between a Minecraft community server and, say, the private servers for World of Warcraft that Blizzard have been launching lawsuits against in the last month? The answer is, it's all about permission and the reservation of rights. Right now, to set up a Minecraft community server, you need to agree to Minecraft's end user license agreement. If you break that, Mojang withdraws your permissions to host the server, and then there actually could be legal action. Mojang basically keeps all rights to the game. Then there's the private server hosts that Blizzard are suing. They never had that permission that you are given by, say, Minecraft. They never had that in the first place. So when Ward talks about community servers for Call of Duty, it's basically the same deal. Some of the older COD games let you host your own servers, but a game like, say, Modern Warfare Remastered does not. And that's why Activision reserves the right to have modders shut down if they offer any alternatives. So that's a breakdown of this whole Minecraft thing, and in the follow-up statements that were made to press, that's pretty much how they explained it as well. That their concern was with what they understood to be private servers. And on that note, the Notorious Markets comment actually backs that up. As recently as 2019, WoW private servers like Warmane and Firestorm were sat on that list alongside the Pirate Bay and VK. And it was actually the ESA themselves who flagged those servers up to the government as being a problem whenever they were consulted. There's then the safety question. Minecraft have come under a lot of scrutiny from the likes of Australia's eSafety Commissioner over child protection tools, even on like fully legitimate community servers. Gibbons' framing is really quite clumsy here, but there is a point that's being made. Though obviously, having a point is not the same as being right. So watch the language closely. What she's describing is the Warmane kind of server, the kind that never had permission. What Ward's clause would create is the Minecraft kind, with permission built in. So she's answering a question about one with fears about the other, which does certainly seem to be a bit fucking manipulative. And of course, she's framing those existing private servers in the most unpleasant way that she can. Do you know why? That's really simple. It's because that's what she's here to do. She is here to make sure that nothing changes in the games industry that creates any new risks for the businesses represented by the ESA. And that's even if individual companies might agree with Stop Killing Games. Basically, in a world where this bill passes, those community servers might be exempt from, say, DMCA rules. Right now, they are not. She wants to highlight that. And then that leaves Menikovar to her last question, and that's going back to the copyright concern that Smallwood Cuevas brought up but never got answered. Things like residuals, ownership, rights over likenesses, things that might actually impact the end of life for those proposed community servers. And this is where we really see the bill lose its support. So one of the fears then is that these end-of-life community servers could lead to loads of problems, right? And Ward does recognize that there could be some legitimate concerns around this, the kind around, say, maybe AI manipulation of images or intellectual property and any of those things that could be hot-button issues within Hollywood and could pertain to whatever people do within private servers. His solution was to explain that this whole community server option thing wasn't even originally in the bill, and that it doesn't actually have to stay in the bill. Here's what he said.
But if that is something that is reaching new criticism and injecting new kind of points about safety or about violation of copyright, it's not something that needs to be in the final form of this bill. I was just responding to other senators on another committee as like an expanding menu of options here too.
Now, he suggested removing the community server option altogether, or maybe just letting a separate bill exist to handle those concerns. And that's on top of the commitments that he'd already promised to other senators for further amendments. And Menikovar's questioning effectively ends with Ward confirming it. The bill in front of the committee won't be the bill that reaches the Senate floor. And that seemingly is what ended up failing this bill. What meant that it didn't get the votes that it needed. It wasn't the Minecraft scaremongering. Smallwood Cuevas was already uncomfortable with the language of the bill before the whole illegal Minecraft server thing was mentioned. And what we saw was Ward trying to get this bill through each committee, and as that was happening, it was being altered to meet the concerns of the last person who saw it. And as Menikovar says, she sympathizes with Ward's position. Quote, "I can imagine being stuck in a hard place because other members were asking for something, and now the unintended consequences of that are here with the protection part." And that is the frustrating thing about this. But this final group of senators, as Smallwood Cuevas says, are, quote, "the last stop on this bill." Basically, their job is to scrutinize it in something close to its final form. That is the same, quote, "serious process" that Stop Killing Games themselves praised when they were decrying the EU Commission in their recent open letter. And it essentially seems that that commitment to process meant that by the time the bill reached this group, that it had just been altered to the point where there were now too many open questions and too many unrefined options left. Basically, they needed to see something more concrete before they would pass this bill into law. They did not. So what we saw was actually not them voting against the bill. Instead, 4 senators, including both of our question askers that have been covered in this video, abstained. Now that meant that the bill could not go forward, but here's a big thing to take away. Nobody voted the bill down. So this is not a case of they flat out disagreed with what it was trying to do. They just couldn't convince enough people to say yes to it in its current form. And with that said, it's next time to work out what happens next. Okay, the glimmer of hope is that there is still a very slim chance that this bill could still pass this year. What's happened is it's been put up for reconsideration, where it will basically get one final review. But Stop Killing Games already seem to have moved on. They do promise to return to California next year, quote, "with an in-person lobbying presence, the funding to do this properly, and a long list of organizations and developers signed on in support." And the plan does go, of course, beyond California. There's other states, there's even federal legislation that they're targeting. And with the lessons that they've learned about how much the bill's final wording matters, I think it's quite likely that the next attempt will come better prepared. But of course, the Electronic Software Association will be waiting for them. And you can be damn sure they'll do everything in their power to poke holes in this, to put hard-to-answer what-ifs into the discussion, the sort of thing that may not lead to a senator voting against the bill, but that may lead to them abstaining. And for the ESA, defenders of the status quo, abstention is really all they need. But that's not the only abstinence story going on in gaming. A lot of people are having to abstain from buying gaming hardware of any kind because it's went completely mad. And in fact, even from where we are now, some prices are expected to double. That sounds insane and spooky. And if you want to learn about it, watch this video next.